but we'll run through this. We are going to be recording this today, so if you want to review anything later, we can do that. We'll also make it available on our website, and I think Scott will probably get it onto the SBDC website as well. My name's Evan Rice, and today we've got Scott Tabor with me, and we're going to be talking about securing banks and how banks can work with their commercial clients on cybersecurity awareness and the impacts of banks as that banks have as they work with small business clients that are especially regional banks and banks that deal heavily with small businesses and the risks that they carry from a cybersecurity standpoint. Um, just a little bit about me. I am the senior vice president of a company called GuideStar, which is a division of CCI Systems. We're an Upper Michigan-based um, IT services and cybersecurity services group. I serve on a bunch of different educational boards, and I met Scott a couple of years back as we both were participating in the Northern Michigan University Upper Peninsula Cybersecurity Institute, and we were looking at kind of driving more of these conversations around banking and small business security. And I thought Scott would be a great resource to bring in. So I'll let Scott kind of give himself the intro as well.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And I remember that conference. It was a lot of fun. We did a panel together and then had some great breakout sessions. So it was a great time. But yeah, I'm Scott Tabor from the Michigan Small Business Development Center. I am our cybersecurity awareness specialist. And that is a big fancy title, long title, just to say I am our small business consultant really for cybersecurity for our clients, do training, education awareness, one-on-one consulting with clients to really help them get an understanding of what cybersecurity means for their particular small business and the steps that they can take to help really minimize the risks of a cyber attack. And then to also prepare them to speak with people like Evan when they are looking at having on some of those more complicated tools that need professional support and configuration. So that's kind of what I do, and my background before coming here was a security analyst at Ferris State University. Managed full disk encryption, email security, did incident response, mobile device management, you name it. We probably did it there. We were a small team, and we did pretty much everything. That was a good time. All
Great,
right.
thanks.
Yeah.
So just a quick little overview on GuideStar. Like I said before, we're a division of CCI Systems. We're based out of the UP, and we really want to help drive practical cybersecurity into the small to medium business. It starts with, tactics and understanding what it is you're protecting and then who's going to help you do that and then the tool sets. I think a lot of times as IT people we tend to jump right to the technology and we need to know that we're leveraging the right technology in those cases. And just really it's been a great opportunity to kind of branch out as a division of CCI and happy to be here presenting today.
Yeah, and to give a background of the Michigan SBDC, in case not everyone is familiar with us, we used to call ourselves really the best kept secret. And really, since COVID, I can't say we're the best kept secret anymore because we are no longer a secret. But what we do and who we are, just let me talk about that a little bit. So, the Michigan Small Business Development Center, we are one of many different SBDCs all across the entire country and U.S. territories. And so, we have in our particular state 10 different regions that we are a part of. And I come from the lead center, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so we kind of are the overseer or it says the lead center of those 10 regions. And we get our funding, and really I always have to talk about this because it's great that we do, and they are wonderful partners for us and stakeholders is the U.S. Small Business Administration, and then also the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, along with matching partners and funds throughout the whole state. So, like for example, I work at Grand Valley State University. They are my host institution, as I said, based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So all of your tax dollars are going towards us to be able to do what we do to help all of the wonderful small businesses that we have. And I know we've got a few slides coming up that's really going to show the impact of why that's important, because of how important small businesses are just to our economy and across the state and to the country. So let's go on to that next slide. And we can talk a little bit about really the evolution of banking when it comes to cybersecurity and the threat landscape, and really where we started and where we are, and potentially where we're headed. Right. So one of the, looking back at the past history of, I'm thinking, in the early 90s and in the 90s in general, the internet is just becoming a thing. Everyone is starting to get on AOL, or they're getting on, we're going on the dial-up, plugging in our phone lines, hearing the wonderful dial tones that we would get, and we're starting to surf the internet. And so in that, really at that time frame, there was a really not a huge threat when it came to the internet towards banking at that moment. Things were much more personal. You still would go into the bank to deposit money or to withdraw money for your business. You'd go in there and bring in all the, your dollar bills to get quarters and nickels and dimes to bring back. Everything was really much more in person, and made it that much more difficult for, really at that time, a cybersecurity or a cyber criminal, a hacker, someone who's, trying to exploit things on the internet. There really wasn't that facing yet. Just because we didn't have banking websites, we didn't have logins to do transactions online. So it was much more personal. So it's difficult for criminals to really get that information. Not that it didn't happen, but it made it that much harder. In recent history, going into say the early 2000s, we start getting smartphones at that time. We start getting better computers, and we start really seeing online banking really make its first foray into being more popular. We have banking websites now that we can sign in with, check our accounts, deposit, do online deposits, do transactions between accounts, start purchasing products online. That's probably right at the tail end of when eBay hit their biggest boom point with late 90s, early 2000s. So it became a fad. Everyone wanted to make online purchases, and we'd connect right to our bank accounts. So that threat landscape really started to increase at that time frame. If we want to jump into really the more modern times until now, like 2010 and onward, every one of us has a smartphone, if not two or three of them. I know I've got a work phone, I've got a personal phone, I've got a laptop in front of me, I've got an Amazon smart tablet in front of me as well. So you have all these different devices that that all connect to the internet and that we use for our everyday banking, finances, types of apps, and really everything we do. We look at that threat landscape, it's increased dramatically. I probably have 5 or 6 of the different cash apps all on my personal mobile device, right? Because all my friends, family, they all use a different one. So in order to do, transfer money between accounts and to, pay for dinner and then to reimburse me or whatever, we all have to have, unfortunately, different cash apps, right? So that's kind of the way it is. We have things like cryptocurrency that are really coming into play. And I know I'll briefly mention that a little bit later on one of the slides on why it's important to protect our accounts as a small business, as your customer, as your client, because cyber criminals going to want to transfer money out of a stolen account right to cryptocurrency, so that money is no longer recoverable for your client. As we mentioned, we have full online banking now. Every bank, every institution, you have an online app. You have an app you download that, hopefully a person is using things like multi-factor authentication, having strong passwords on there in case their devices get stolen. But it really, that threat landscape has completely changed from really the past history till now. To really, I don't want to call it the Wild West, because we have an understanding of what's going on, but really it's much more of a free-for-all with all the different apps, all the different purchasing websites, the card swipes that people can put on their phones for their small business. That way they can take money from a person's credit card at a flea market, at garage sales, at any kind of event. So it's much more of a larger threat landscape than it really ever has been before, and it's just going to keep going that way. If you want to go on to the next slide, Evan. And when thinking about that larger threat and small businesses in particular, we found that around 46% of all data breaches really are starting to impact small businesses. They're starting to really focus on and target our small businesses. So that's an eye-opening stat right there. And then another one that we really want to look at is that 424%. That's a huge number of an increase in small business cyber breaches, within just the last year. So you can see that it's a very real threat to our small businesses, and we'll talk a little bit about how and why that's happening here in a few slides. But as you can see, it's definitely it's a real threat. And then you can see and the importance of small businesses that I kind of broached upon at the very beginning. 43% of the GDP is attributed to small businesses. So that's a huge percentage right there. And really, small businesses in the eyes of the federal government and in the eyes of, say, the SBDC is 500 employees or less. Um, so you may think, well, 500 employees, that doesn't seem like a small business, and you're probably right when you look at, just employee size, but it is what's classified as a small business. Because as we know, there are definitely organizations out there who have thousands and tens of thousands of employees. So that's how you can look at 500 and go, yep, I get it. That's a small business now. And there's a little bit of a changing of really the guard of what we think of what hackers are and cyber criminals are. And really in the last 10 to 15 years, I know when I first started in cybersecurity, going to classes for it, and even before that, I think there was always that stereotype of you have the hacker who's sitting in a hoodie with a hoodie up, covering their face, hunched over a keyboard, and they're just typing away on a keyboard, trying to hack your company, trying to hack your bank, trying to, they're actively trying to get on your network, and they're, a bunch of keyboard strokes. But we know that's not really the reality, and probably never really was the true reality. A lot of it was much more automated, where they would create tools to do that for them, so that way they could go do their 9 to 5 jobs as well. But we've seen that kind of shift away from the individual doing the majority of it to more of a state-sponsored, nation-state type of really landscape now, where you have nation-state espionage, and that's obviously trying to steal private information, whether it's military secrets, economy secrets, research secrets, whether it's for like nuclear or submarines or jet fighters or whatever the case could be. Maybe they're trying to steal a secret for the development of a manufacturing process, right? We know that certain countries almost always try to steal that type of data, so that way they can then mimic and recreate that product on their own side of things at a cheaper price and really undercut the current small business that's been manufacturing it. And we also have an increase of organized crime. So you can think of the mafia, essentially organized crime rings that are actively trying to get financial gain, attacking businesses, colleges, universities, hospitals, banks, you name it. They're targeting them. But then you also have, I think, the nation states that are really not just letting the organized crimes take place in their country, but sanctioning it, where they are letting them, not prosecuting, not turning the blind eye, but they're actually funding them to get that money to really help their own economies. There's a few countries I don't ever like naming countries off, but I think we can probably think of which ones they are, where they've actually have their military actually does cybercrime and does hacking just for financial gain to help fund their own military and to fund their own government. Um, so they're
Another
not
thing
just
that's a really
yeah.
interesting one in that regard too is, I don't know if it was this past year or the year before, but um, cybercrime from a total revenue dollars generated has officially passed the drug trade globally, as far as how big it is and the amount of money that it generates, which for years and years that was the biggest black market economy that we had. Cybercrime is officially the number one now, over the drug trade. And that's because it's easy. So there's a
Yep.
really good aspect there. Yeah, so we're definitely seeing that shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And you say it's easy because you can either download the tools for free, or you can purchase them for $2, $3, $10, and you get your own set of ransomware. And
And
thanks for going to
yeah,
that next slide. Let's go ahead and talk about this, and getting back to the importance of small businesses, right? And we think about it in the terms of our state and the state of Michigan, because that's where we are. Small businesses accounted for almost 48% of employment in 2019. So almost half of employment in the state was small businesses. So you can see that we play a very critical role in the Michigan economy right there. That without our small businesses, well, you know what? We're going to have a high unemployment. We're not going to have the spending money, which means we're not going to be taking out loans to start businesses. We're not going to be taking out loans to buy new printers for our businesses or manufacturing tools or vehicles. We're not going to be able to do those things without these small businesses that make such a huge impact. And when you look at just the dollar amounts of loans given out, and that really impacts the small business community, and the amount of money that's being transacted between banks and small businesses. In 2020, there was a report that said that in the state of Michigan, $3.2 billion of loans were given to Michigan businesses with revenues of $1 million or less. So that's a huge amount right there, 3.2 billion. That's a huge impact on the economy and allowing those businesses to really try to grow and to become a footprint and have that footprint and be a stable, successful business. So it's a fantastic number to see. Yep, and it's great. We can say right on this slide here. So some common exploits when it comes to banking customers, and this is what it's been reported over the years. And in 2022, the number one type that was reported was really credit card info exploits or theft. And I think that comes really as no surprise. I'm willing to bet that every one of us on this call this afternoon has probably got alerted by our financial institution that said, "Hey, is this purchase yours or is this not purchase yours?" And you went, "Nope, that one's not mine. Discontinue the card, send me a new one," right? And stop that payment. So that this become almost everyday life for us right now. So not a shocker at all to see that is the number one exploit that's really hitting your customers. That's hitting us as just in general here. But looking at some of the non-credit card ones, and this is where it can get more interesting and a little bit harder to protect not only yourself as the banks, but also to have your customers, the small businesses, to protect themselves. We know, just a quick recap of what phishing is, because that's at 32%, one of the leading causes. And phishing is really phone call scams, right? It's like, think of a phishing email, but over the phone, where someone's calling you pretending that, I represent your bank and we found fraudulent activity on your account. Can you give me your first name, last name, password to your account, and then, your account number? Okay, so that way we can verify if these purchases are yours. Well, that's now a fraudulent call coming into a customer, and the customer's going to go, "Okay, yeah, this sounds right. Let me give you all this data, all this information," and boom, now as the cyber criminal, I have access to the account. I'm going to transfer that money out, and circling back to that cryptocurrency, as I mentioned earlier, you know what? As a hacker, as a criminal, I'm going to take that money and transfer it immediately to either like a cryptocurrency, or I'm going to transfer it immediately to 2, 3, 4 other financial institutions that are probably all overseas, so that way it's no longer going to be recoverable at that point. So the client can't recover it, and you can't recover that money. The next one is 31% with remote text scams, and that's where those are almost always going to be phishing calls as well. But it's a different category of it, and that's where I'm going to call up and pretend I'm Microsoft, pretend I'm Google, and say, "Hey, I'm Microsoft, and we found 4 viruses on your computer. You know what? Let's go ahead and bring you to this website. Can I have you download this program? And now I just had you download a malicious software that's going to allow me, the cyber criminal, remote access to your device whenever I want." Or they're going to say, "Hey, you know what? I need you to go to this website instead, enter in your username and password," and now they stole the credentials of the small business. And that brings you right into that 30% mark with the stolen credentials through phishing calls, remote text scam calls. And this is where it can get really creative. As a cyber criminal, as a hacker, I can create a website that looks identical to your website, put it in a link in an email, and say, "Hey, we found some fraudulent activity. Can you confirm this on the website? Can you confirm this by logging into the website?" I mimic your website verbatim, a one-to-one copy. The user tries to sign in with their username and password, and they hit enter or sign in, log in, whatever that button is going to say, and then it's going to take them to a page that might just say, "Hey, we have an error. System down for maintenance, whatever it is. Try again later." And then the person's going to go, "Oh, that makes kind of sense. If my account was compromised, then maybe the website's down because everyone is." But in reality, that cyber criminal just got their username and password. They're going to sign into the actual account, take that money, transfer it out. Money's going to be gone under most circumstances. If you want to head on to the next slide, Evan.
Mhm.
Yeah, there we are. So a couple more things on, when looking at small businesses in particular again, and why it really matters to help protect them and educate our small businesses when it comes to cybersecurity. We saw those a few slides back. We're talking about number of data breaches and the increase of it. And this is going to come from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report from 2022. And if you aren't familiar with this report, I highly recommend everyone to put it on your calendar every year to download it. It is an extremely thorough report that Verizon puts out, free of charge. You just have to submit your email. They email it to you, and boom, you get it. But it's a an extremely well thought out report that shows the trends over the previous years and the trend over the last year in particular. And they break it down to attack types, what's going on, how they're doing it, industry sectors. So that way I'd say you can look specifically at banking within the report and see how the banking world is reporting different cyber attacks that are impacting them. These particular slides are looking at small businesses, and small businesses in this report means 1 to 10 employees, and that's impactful for us. And I really love that they changed their definition, because they used to do up to 1,000 employees, and so that was kind of an overkill for really what small businesses are, but more in particular what the small businesses in the state of Michigan look like and what my client size looks like. Most of my clients and most of the SBDC's clients are in that 1 person to 10 person employee number for small businesses. So you can almost think of micro-sized business. And out of those, they reported 832 incidents to Verizon. That's what they were able to identify. And 130 of those were found to have been with data disclosure. And that comes out to, I think, around 16%, I want to say, if I'm remembering correctly. 16% of those known reported incidences led to a data disclosure, so a data breach. And we want to take that number with a grain of salt, because we know that's only what was reported. How many data breaches and incidents and events, cyber attacks, weren't reported? Most places, most businesses, organizations don't have to report them, and even the ones that do have to report them, don't always report them. I know there's a large large business in the United States that's trying to replace taxi cabs. I'm not going to name names again, but they do essentially drive people around, and they also deliver food now, where they are having executives prosecuted for hiding and lying about data breaches. So even those bigger organizations don't always disclose them if they have to. So we know that this number is vastly underreported. But getting back to it, we also see, that social engineering and system intrusion are 2 of the biggest reasons why and how these things happen. So it goes back to the phishing attacks, vishing attacks, system intrusion of, tricking that user to give in the username and password, being able to install malware on someone's computer. And all of these, what they found in all 130 of these, it was all financial related. So they weren't trying just to get someone's email account just for funsies. They weren't trying to do it because they can. They were doing it to get a financial gain out of it. And then looking at the next stat over here, when looking at it, we see how it's done. Use of stolen creds, so your credentials are being stolen, and then also ransomware. And ransomware has really evolved over the years. And I don't know if Evan, if you're going to talk deeper on ransomware as we go on or not, but a quick thing on how it's evolved. It used to be where they would encrypt your data, but now the attackers are saying, we've stolen your data and we'll expose it, because they found that encrypting it wasn't always a successful return on investment for themselves. That businesses have caught wise to it, and that they would no longer pay the ransom, and they'd go ahead, encrypt it. I'm going to recover from my data backups. So instead, they're now stealing the data, and they're going to threaten to expose it online if you don't pay the ransom. Now, obviously, the question is if you pay it, are they still going to expose it or not? Well, that's the risk you can take. If you want to go to the next slide. All right, and then it's looking at a few other reasons when getting back to really the how of these attacks are happening. So as you can see, this is also from the Verizon report, and the next few slides are from that report. It's because it's such a great resource. You're seeing over the years from 2017 to 2021 listed here, really the different ways and different types of attacks that cyber criminals were implementing. Things like denial of service, system intrusions, phishing, social engineering, lost and stolen assets, the lost and stolen devices. But really, it's that next slide that I think is going to be more impactful. If there we are, and the reason why this one's more impactful is because this is the patterns of those types of attacks that are happening that resulted in data breaches. So as you can see, system intrusion has skyrocketed over the last handful of years to really being the number one reason or the number one cause of data breaches. So that's something to always be very cognizant of, is that cyber criminals are reverting back to using, really the malicious software, using malware again, and really trying to exploit systems to get that access again. And really that's through things like misconfigurations, vulnerabilities that haven't been identified yet. So that's what you're seeing in there. And you can see social engineering is really one of the other big ones. along with basic web application attacks. And that's going to be, website issues where your website might not be configured correctly to protect from me trying to inject, some SQL or some Java into your website or other types of attacks into your website to get access to the back end of it. That way I can bypass the actual login. Things like that. So those are really the three big ones that we see. And yep, if you want to go to that final slide, I think here, Evan, it's really ransomware. As you can see over the years, it too has skyrocketed. It's still one of the biggest threats out there. And with the fact that they've changed the game from encrypting to taking your data and stealing it to threatening to release it, has really opened that game up again for ransomware gangs that are out there. So it's definitely a real threat, something that we want to always educate clients on, especially all of these types of attacks. Right? If your clients aren't doing these things to protect their small business, they're going to fall victim. If they're not aware of ransomware attacks, if they aren't aware of how to protect their systems, they aren't aware what phishing emails look like. And that's why educating our small businesses is really critical to protecting our economy, protecting you, the banks, protecting obviously their success as a small business owner.
Great. Yeah. And thanks, Scott, for
Yeah.
setting the table and really kind of giving us the background of what's real about the threat. And so now we want to kind of transition this into what really matters for the banks, and why banks should care about small to medium business cybersecurity. And I think about what you said, Scott, about how many loans are given out every year to small to medium businesses, what component of our GDP is generated off of the money that small businesses are earning every year. And there's two ways that cybersecurity at a bank is can really be looked at. And one, banks have a really good handle on. And the number one is banks can get hacked. I work with quite a few banks. I'm on a small regional bank board here locally, and banks do a great job protecting their own assets. But the one thing that they can't protect themselves from is the behavior of their customers. And that's the second prong in why banks need to care about small to medium business cybersecurity, is because if their customers take on an incident and lose financial solvency, go out of business, deposit accounts or other accounts at the bank are breached and money's lost, it can hurt the relationship with the customer. And that spans across traditional deposit accounts. Bank, customers may default on loan payments if they can't make their payments. And now more and more banks are also doing wealth and trust management components where they're managing kind of off book assets with retirement accounts and investment portfolios, and the security of those items is also a risk. So banks need to make sure that their small to medium customers are protected and protecting themselves, because the access to the money that they represent can be put at risk through a cyber incident.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can chime in real quick, I just put a link in the chat of from SANS Institute, one of really a great cybersecurity resource. They actually on June 7th, they must have known we were doing this presentation today. Their Ouch, which is their monthly publication, their monthly newsletter, was on securing your financial accounts, with great tips that we recommend to all customers, all clients to do.
Right. And so I think within the banking environment, there's some things, that banks can give to their customers that allow them, that can help protect them a little more. One of the things that we see a lot of is banks offering check fraud protection, where you can, and there's a few different name brands for that out there and companies that help provide that. But basically, you integrate with your customers, checking systems, or you get a check register from them that protects the to line and the dollar amount line on those checks, to make sure that only the checks they say they're writing are the ones that go through, and the old school, add a few zeros or redirect it to a new account can't happen. And then obviously access to credit monitoring, access to training. Banks, especially in small communities or community regional banks, really are seen as the experts in a lot of things in their area. Bankers have access to loans, have access to money. They're the financial advisors where they live, and so having training components and being that thought leader in your environment with that training can be a huge benefit to your bank, really help solidify your standing in the community, and as a kind of an almost an advisory service for these small businesses. And then obviously providing online banking, and we put with FMA, but I'll kind of add to that to say with secure good processes, right? You've got MFA enabled. They know that the online banking you're giving them is secure. Their accounts are secure. They can manipulate those things on their phone, on the website, whatever, and not have to worry about the security that's done there. And banks do a great job with a lot of this because of all the regulations and the audits and everything they have to go through every year. They do a great job, but it's that outreach piece that we really want to focus on today. So what should your commercial clients be worried about? If you were going to engage in outreach for these clients, what are the things you would absolutely want to talk to them about? And there's three things that we're going to cover here. We're going to cover what I call the mission critical controls. We're going to talk a little bit about privacy, and then having an incident response plan in case the worst happens, what to do in those cases. So when I talk about mission critical controls, there's really sort of three spheres of influence. I call this the cybersecurity triad. There's really three spheres of influence that make cybersecurity controls important. The most important one always has been, always will be, is current hacker activity. What are the bad actors doing to try to get at your money, your data, and your systems? But there's other pieces to this. There's government components, and compliance components. And then there's also insurance concerns. More and more cybersecurity insurance is getting harder and harder to get. The questionnaires people are going through, how you shift that liability. And for banks, making sure that their clients have um, cybersecurity insurance can help because of the ability to have um, you know shifted liability and some financial redress if something bad were to go happen, and continue that they can, or to make sure they can continue to pay their bills. um, so when we talk about the mission critical controls, it's the area of this Venn diagram where all the three circles align. So these controls are the things that are going to progress any compliance program, help against hackers, and also help qualify you for insurance. This is the most bang for your buck. And this is really where you have to start as a small organization. And there's things like annual cybersecurity training for all your employees. We always say we can patch a computer, we can patch software, but we can't patch people. And the answer is yes, you can. You just have to educate them. So having an annual cybersecurity training program is critical. Using and actively managing a modern firewall. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, this was the number one technical concern of everybody in the cybersecurity industry. And then the pandemic happened and we all jumped out to the world and nobody's behind the firewall anymore. And so what that brings in is the next thing, where we're protecting our systems with multi-factor authentication and advanced email protection and security filtering, because we aren't all behind the firewall anymore. So making sure that people can't authenticate in from the outside is really kind of the first step in this now, outside of that. And then your best defense against ransomware always has been and continues to be comprehensive system data and backup recovery tools and techniques. Now, everybody says they have backups, at least most people we talk to. What very few people actually do is test and drill on the use of their backups. Are they scanning their backups to make sure the backups aren't infected? Have you tried restoring one of your backups in a test environment in the last 2 years so that if the worst happens, they still work? That kind of set it and forget it mentality on the backups is something that hackers take advantage of and can really hurt you in the long run. Um, so this next one is endpoints are protected with managed detection and response. So what managed detection and response is, it's a new approach to what would traditionally be just antivirus, anti-malware scanning. And what it does is it enables endpoints to have automated response. And with MDR, and more particularly, it gives access to people who can come in and monitor those alerts and respond to those things. It's a much more robust thing. It's not just using predetermined definitions on viruses. It's using kind of machine learning and AI to recognize patterns of behavior, to recognize patterns in code, and recognize things that maybe it doesn't actually have a definition for, but it thinks might be malware, and throw an alert. It's really a more proactive approach than a reactive approach like traditional malware. There's a big push with insurance industry right now to get onto an EDR and MDR platform. And then the last one is have cybersecurity insurance. And cybersecurity insurance is a big one because it's how you limit your liability. You make sure you have that so that you can push the damage control financially and otherwise to another organization. And cybersecurity insurance providers bring a lot of resources to the table that are very valuable for a small amount of money. You get access to an incident response team that's best in the world. You get access to ransomware negotiators, which I know that sounds crazy that you might need that, but you get access to those folks, and they are incredibly good at their job and can limit your losses there. So those insurance companies, it's not just about getting your money back. They give you real tools and access to resources during an incident. So the next thing I want to talk about is privacy. And if there is a part of the legal and compliance component within cybersecurity in the United States today that's changing as fast as humanly possible, it's privacy. Um, Unlike the European Union, where they've got the General Data Protection Rule and a few other areas, we don't have sort of an overarching federal privacy set of legislation and standards. And so what's happening is all of the states are sort of making their own. And some of them are good, some of them are not so good, some of them directly conflict with each other, and you can't possibly be compliant in one state versus another. And so managing the rules around privacy and what these small businesses are allowed to do with the information that they have, and disclosures on if data is leaked. And so making sure that you have that MFA and the multi-factor in place on password hygiene is going to protect that data so it can't exfiltrate. Um, One of the biggest things we see where data exfiltration occurs and privacy violations happen is the use of public Wi-Fi. People will go out and set up bogus Wi-Fi portals at a coffee shop. They'll call it Starbucks 2, and it looks a little faster, and people will log on, and then they're doing a man in the middle of the attack, and they're taking everything. So public Wi-Fi is a huge way that we see privacy problems happen. And then there's the kind of classic social engineering scams, and particularly with banks, the ACH redirect, where you call somebody up and say, hey, our checking account changed, update it to this, and you do what you think is a normal payment, and off it goes to somebody else. Those are all things where that data has to be controlled, and the processes and procedures these organizations have for the control and the access of their privacy data needs to be really strong. And then the other part about privacy that's tough is, as they've learned to, like, as and Scott talked about this, as they've learned to turn information into money, the 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 popularity and the lack of trackability of cryptocurrency has made it very easy for them to ride off into the sunset with your money and never come back. And so when we talk about privacy, it's really about making sure that the small to medium business understands the rules for the industry they're in, understands the um, the the rules for the type of data that they are managing, and then has the right types of advisors, whether that be legal or accounting or otherwise, to help them understand how they can manage and control that data. So the last step I want to talk about, I won't say is the most important, but it's the one that's often the most overlooked. People are very good at putting controls in place to feel like they're protected, but they've never, it's kind of like putting smoke detectors in a school or smoke alarms in a school, but then never having a fire drill. They've invested in this infrastructure, but the reality is, if the worst were to happen, nobody knows how to use it, or they've never tried. Um, and so with incident prevention and response, it's kind of who to call, when to call, what to report, and how to protect yourself. And I think of kind of the Ghostbusters song always runs in my head when I hear that. But it's really true. Who are you going to call? And have you had those conversations with your leadership? Have you had those conversations with your IT support staff or your third parties? And really, it's, you have to have a plan and you have to practice it. The second step would be to monitor your systems. You can't wait until the ransomware has hit and you're locked out of your systems to know that you have a problem. So you want to make sure that you've got MDR in place, you have a managed firewall, that you're using intrusion prevention and detection systems, and that your whatever systems you have and the availability you have there. And there are low cost options for all of these tools that don't break the bank, that can protect a small business. And then the third one is have the playbook. I always think of the sports analogy. You don't want to be inventing the playbook during the game, right? If the team that's prepared and understands the plays and has practiced what the other team is going to do and their responses to that, is really the team that's going to win the game. And so who should you call? Well, do you want to, you should probably, if you know you have a problem, let's get this under attorney-client privilege. Let's call the legal team in. Let's call the insurance company. Sometimes they bring a legal team with them. They're going to get the incident response people and all the data forensics people in place. Call your bank right away. Everyone that's here working in the banking industry is probably saying hallelujah on that one. So often people don't call their bank soon enough, but the ability to get that money back is directly related to the time since it left. Um, at a conference a couple of years ago, I think Scott was there too. There was a gentleman from the Secret Service that was in Michigan who's responsible for, basically, his office does all of the money tracking for the Secret Service when there's cyber theft. And he said that, you know, after 48 hours, it's gone. Like their chances of getting it back shrink exponentially every few hours that they're not looking at it as they're trying to trace it. And they have a pretty good recovery rate. They're under resourced, I'll say that, but they have a pretty good recovery rate. So getting law enforcement and the bank on the horn sooner is going to get that. The longer it's gone, the less likely you are to get it back. The more banks it jumps through, especially the bigger banks that aren't as concerned about small dollars from a small, what appears to be small dollars, even though to a small business it can be very impactful, aren't always so great to work with getting that money back. The forces have the technical controls in place to recover. This is back to testing. So have a plan and then try it. Make sure that the resources work. And then have a communication plan. There's so many things that you, from a liability standpoint, that small businesses can open themselves up to if they communicate the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person. So understanding what you can communicate, how and who you should communicate to, and having those called out both internally to your employees, your third parties, your vendors, your customers, and then externally to the community at large, to whatever else may be there, is really important. And then the sixth step is, this can't be a one and done process for creating an incident prevention response. It's got to be cyclical. You have to be reviewing this information and looking to improve on it all the time. So with those items, that's really kind of what the core of what a small business needs from a cybersecurity standpoint. But how can banks help with this, especially regional small banks that work with a lot of small community, um, small businesses? And really, what Scott and I have come up with is, you can offer educational components as a free service to your commercial customers. Um, and what we do is, GuideStar and the SBDC has teamed up to kind of offer to come in and do that. It's an important part to both our missions. We really care about protecting the small business community and working with banks as partners. And it can be presented in person, it can be presented virtually, or both. We're happy to come to your town, to work out of your office, to meet in an offsite location, and to kind of brand this as something you're giving to your community, and getting those commercial customers in the door, or other community members that might say, like, hey, this bank's really a thought leader for me. They're trying to keep me more safe, and I'm not really happy with the credit union down the street that I've been doing business with for a while, and I'm going to jump ship over here because I can see that they really have my best interest at heart. And it's really kind of reinforces that bank as the stable strength security institution within that community, whether virtually or in person. So I guess with that, I want to open it up to any questions. Feel free to throw anything in the chat if you've got questions about, kind of the program and what we offer and how that works, or if you want to talk anything about any of the topics we covered today.
Yeah, and while we wait for some questions, Evan, kind of circling back to us a little bit at the SBDC and the size of the small businesses in Michigan's economy. I love to tout this number. Last year in 2022, the Michigan SBDC uh, helped really create a capital formation of over $400 million within the state of Michigan for small businesses. So that's they're working with the community banks like yourselves. They're working with some larger banks. They're getting SBA loans, and then a lot of those go through your banks to get. And so you can see that's such a huge impact, and really the importance of why educating our small businesses really it's crucial.
Yeah. And Mike, I saw that you did put a question in the Q&A tab there about defining system intrusion. And when Scott was looking at that slide and looking at system intrusion, what system intrusion really is it's the access and installation of malware. So it's however they get in, and then they install unapproved software that allows them to run rampant within your organization. That's what's classified as system intrusion.
Yep, and then they can jump around between different servers you have, all your different systems you have in place. So that's really what that definitely entails, and that's nasty when that happens. It's
Right.
hard to pinpoint necessarily where they came in from, and every solution that you have, what's impacted, right? Did you clean everything? Did you miss something? Particularly with we have Trojan horses that just hide and don't communicate back, and just like the word is and the story goes, Trojan horses, the Greeks, they're with what was it, Odysseus or whichever is
Yeah,
the
it was
Greek.
one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they sneak in with the giant horse and they attack the town, and that's what Trojan horse malware does.
Yeah, phishing and business email compromise, Mike, is still for sure the number one uh, kickoff point for access. Now that's done in a couple of different ways. Phishing emails that's the classic trick them into giving away a username and password, but we're also seeing a very huge uptick in the use of malicious files. So they'll say, "Hey, we got this invoice. I don't understand." And they'll send you an Excel file that's you click and open, and that Excel file has malicious code built into it, or either through a macro or just into the file itself that will install malware on your systems. But yeah, phishing, it it's just so easy, and they don't need to worry. It's a numbers game. It's how, for every 10 million of these emails they send out, they only need one to result in a payday.
Yep, and
Yeah, I agree. Kill macros. You're right.
and the jump on that phishing email discussion, business email compromise emails is really the number one type of phishing attack when it comes to businesses, what they're receiving. And how many of us have received an email maybe from our boss, from a coworker that says, "Hey, I need you to do this important task for me. Are you busy? But hey, I'm in a meeting, so just email me this." Those are really rampant right now, and those are only increasing. I know whenever I work with MC3, which is from the Michigan State Police, and it's really the online internet command center that the Michigan State Police offers. And they say that one of the number one threats they see when it comes to social engineering phishing attacks is those business email compromises. And then those are quick wins for cyber criminals to get either a couple $100 or a couple thousand or more.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of
so those
times
are
what they're doing
dangerous.
too is one of the things we've seen over and over again is someone will get a username and password for someone in a business. Let's say it's an accounts payable person, and they go in, or an accounts receivable person, someone who's generating and sending out invoices. They will only access the email. You'll never know they were there. They'll download the entire inbox and they'll go through it, and they'll pull all the customer contact information, invoice numbers, signature lines, everything. And then what they'll do is they'll spin up a lookalike domain. So instead of being like smallbusiness.com, they'll set up smallbusiness.net, and they will create a, Joe Smith at smallbusiness.net, who's the AR person at the legitimate business that got taken out, and send an identical email from them asking for follow up on what's been paid, what hasn't. They'll determine how much money that you owe that other business. And they'll say, "Oh, and by the way, our banking information has changed. Please direct all future payments here." And if you don't notice the switch from the .com to the .net, all that money starts going somewhere else. And no one ever knows that you hacked that email box because all they did was download it.
Yep.
And so they can sift through it offline later and spin up a lookalike account. Those are really hard to check and connect on. And we're seeing that a lot right now.
Yeah, I mean, and on top of that, I actually wrote a blog article for our website, Small Business Big Threat, and it was on Gmail and how they have verified email accounts now. And what's happening is someone's buying an email address and they're verifying the account, and then they're doing it correctly. But I'm doing it .net instead of .com. But you see the check mark and you go, "Oh, this is UPS.net check mark. Oh, it's the legitimate website. It's the legitimate sender. This is good to go." And so they're making it even more complicated and more complex now for us to really pinpoint by quick glance. Everyone looks at a phishing email, you look for things like spelling, poor grammar, who's the sender. But when you see a verified account as the sender, you're automatically triggered to go, "Ooh, this is probably a good email."
Yeah. Yeah. The hijack cell phones is interesting too. That's referred to as a SIM takeover. Um, Not as common. It's a little more tricky, but I know I work with a woman who has her husband was getting ready to retire, and he'd had a company phone for forever, and he was using it for personal reasons. It's normal, people do that. And he was getting ready to retire, and he was going to lose his company phone, so he bought a cell phone and was in the process of transferring contacts and letting everybody know what his new number was going to be so that he didn't have to like do it knee jerk. And his new phone stopped working, and he called his wife on his work phone. He's like, hey, I don't know what's going on, can you call our phone provider? I don't know who it was, which one of them it was, and figure out why my phone's not working. And so she calls him up, and on the phone they're like, oh yeah, we see that we shipped you your new phone to that Texas address you gave us, and it's been activated. What? We didn't order a new phone, we didn't go to Texas. And turns out that this gentleman had been on a fantasy football website. His email and username and password had been compromised on the fantasy football site, and they did some cross-site checking and found that his email address and his password were valid for a retirement account online banking component, but they were hit with an MFA prompt that said, should we send a text message to this phone number? So they figured out who the provider was, vished the provider, got a new phone sent to them, activated the phone, and as soon as they activated the phone, they logged in, they got the text message, and they ended up taking six figures out of his retirement account, and that money was just gone. Um, so yeah, sim takeover is a real threat. If and the cautionary tale there is, if you don't already have a PIN number set up with your cell phone provider to verify you are who you say you are when you call, please call and do that right away.
Yes, absolutely. And it's I read horror stories of the SIM swap attacks like that
Hmm.
because the cell phone provider doesn't want to work with you because they're like, it's not our fault.
Right.
That whoever the delivery was, whether it's the post office, UPS, FedEx, they don't want to work with you because like we're just delivering it, and then it's almost impossible to get your money back in those instances.
Right. The other thing is, it speaks to the um, while having a text-based MFA is better than nothing, having a token-based MFA with an app on your phone is much better, because they can get your phone, do the SIM takeover onto a new device, but they don't get your app. So going with an app-based token authenticator is a much better form of MFA than a text-based, and especially an email-based one.
And even better, get yourself a YubiKey or I forgot what Google calls theirs, but it's the plug-in USB
Yeah.
that you have plugged into your computer, and then it can wirelessly connect to your cell phone to authenticate if you are signing in on your smartphone too. So that
Yeah.
way you can go
GuideStar
anywhere
just
with it.
recent GuideStar just recently became a partner with a company called Traitware that's true passwordless MFA. It leverages the facial recognition on your phone to send a token. So when you go to log into something, you log into the website, and your phone says, "Are you you?" And you just hold it up, and it looks at your face, and it logs you into the system. It's really slick, and you don't even need password for that. It's completely passwordless. You hit the site, and it says, "Oh, we've been integrated with your single sign-on. We need to prove it's you," and it's all based on biometrics. Pretty cool stuff. So there's lots of changes out there. I guess before we wrap, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've just got a few minutes left. Any other questions or thoughts or feedback for us? Give you a few minutes to type frantically. But if not, we really appreciate taking the time to come today. We are going to make this recording available both on the GuideStar website and the SBDC website, and then we'll probably be posting some snippets and little pieces like that on our social media and everything. If you do want to talk to us about, um, kind of reaching out about anything in the bank, our contact information is on the screen right here. Please feel free to give us a call, shoot us. Scott and I are both kind of giant nerds when it comes to this stuff, and we love talking about it. So we're happy to take a call and just kind of help any way we can, and see if there's an opportunity to team up with you and your banks and the small businesses that live and work in your communities. Thanks so much for the time today, everybody. We really appreciate it.